The door to the quaint motel opened with a gentle, magical push. The moonlight overhead cast the long shadow of the Moon Princess into the already dark room. Twilight trailed a step behind her as they walked inside and lit the small lamp between the pair of beds they requested. Even though Celestia had no need of sleep, she was in no mood to rest, nor could she allow her student to slumber without keeping an eye on her. At least now that they had everything they needed, it could only mean that it was a matter of time before this whole nightmare was put to bed. Twilight set the small bag she found at the Pie residence on the floor next to the nightstand and pulled out the small, smiling stone. She stared into its eyes, curious about all the stories it could have told them. With a sigh, she set it beside the lamp, his lifeless gaze drilling straight into her. The only thing she could think about was Pinky's latest threat, and staring at the rock wasn't going to clear her mind. As she tried to get comfortable on the bed, Celestia slowly walked to the bathroom and found her reflection in the mirror. For a moment, she wasn't sure exactly who was looking back at her. She may have been thousands of years old, but in the last couple of weeks, she felt as if she was starting to show her age. While there were plenty of times she had skipped a few nights' sleep to catch up on some activities, those previous times were for fun or education. Now she'd been awake far longer than she'd been at one time, and was worrying herself sick in the process. If only she wasn't so thoroughly exhausted, she could have simply followed the tracks back to the air, provided she knew the way at all. Even if she did, however, with the way she was feeling, succumbing to fatigue 100 feet in the air was a risk she didn't want to take. The alicorn turned on the sink and splashed some cool water on her face, but it did nothing to remove the heavy bags under her eyes. With a twist of her neck and a stretch of her wings, Celestia dried herself off and left the room. As she walked past the closer bed, she and Twilight shared a quiet glance. The princess tried to put on a reassuring smile, but Twilight knew better. Every night away from Ponyville meant another innocent casualty. They could only hope Private Eye was working on something that would minimize the damage, if he could be done at all. Across from the beds was a small bookcase and a couple dozen novels to kill some time. Eventually, Twilight would want to rest, but there wasn't much else to do till then. The princess turned and scanned over the titles until finding one that caught her eye. It was a comedy, one she'd read before. Considering how things had been lately, she figured she could use a laugh, even if it would only help for a moment. Sitting down on the bed closer to the door, Celestia opened the book and started reading. She was only a few pages in when the silence was broken. "Princess, I've been thinking, and I have something I want to try." "What is it, Twilight?" The unicorn looked down at the bag on the floor and pursed her lips. "I can't imagine that Pinky would know we're not in Ponyville yet. At least I hope not. We honestly don't know how much Spike told her. Plus, we have an item needed for the ceremony, like you said. Why can't we try the ritual and see if it works? I mean, I don't know how else we're supposed to go after her when she's just in our dreams." "I'm not sure. I never saw anything in that ancient book that mentioned such a thing, but I doubt any pony was able to haunt dreams when the spell was originally created," the princess replied, setting the book down. "If you wish, we may try and see if it works. I'll still be able to pull you to safety if it fails." "Do we need to construct the ritual circle or anything before we begin?" "Fortunately, no. As long as everything is present, the spell should work properly." Out of the corner of her eye, Twilight spotted Rocky's chalky smile. She hesitated for a brief moment, knowing what it could mean if her gambit paid off. Despite everything that's transpired, a part of her still wanted Pinky to be free, and saw her as a friend. Still, Twilight knew what ultimately needed to be done. The smooth rock glowed lavender and floated to the blanket beside her. "Then, let's get started." With a yawn, Twilight continued. "I really do hope this works. I can't remember the last time I've had a good night's sleep." There was a knock at the door to the motel. Twilight rolled over and saw the first lights of the morning creeping into the blinds, shining brightly into the empty bed beside her. Taking in a deep, waking breath, she scanned over the room. The princess was nowhere to be found, and strangely, neither was Rocky. Another knock rang out, this time followed by a voice. "Housekeeping!" Shaking a few cobwebs off, the unicorn rubbed her eyes and headed to the door, groaning the whole way. So much for a restful sleep. She opened the door to find a young beige mare with a frizzy, fiery red mane, standing, hiding half her eyes, in front of her. Her short black dress, with a white frills along the base, clung tightly around her waist. She held a feather duster between her teeth and smiled at the groggy student. Yeah, sure. Come in." With a bounce, the maid strutted inside, shaking her hips seductively as she went past Twilight. Though her sultry walk was enough to get Twilight's tired attention, she also found it a tad strange that an old West-style motel would require the help to wear high heels, stockings, and what appeared to be a garter belt on her right hind leg. The housekeeper giggled at Twilight and nudged her with a hip. "Go on, lay down and relax. I've got work to do." "You don't want me to get out of here for a bit?" "Oh no, you can just lay on the bed, kick your hoops up, I won't be long." Shrugging, Twilight did as the maid suggested, stretching out in the middle of the mattress and gently bumping her head against the headboard. Wait, was that there last night? The unicorn let the question go and breathed deeply as she got comfortable. Maybe she could sneak in a few extra minutes of shut-eye while the young mare worked. "You know," the redhead spoke up, "there was a note in the office that you looked rather tense when you signed in last night. The manager suggested I make your morning extra special for you, and I have just the thing." Before Twilight could respond, the maid dropped the feather duster and trot out the door, returning with a fresh silk sheet a moment later. The unicorn lifted her head, curious as to what the worker was going on about. The housekeeper walked up to Twilight's bed and, on her hind legs, rolled the sheet into a rope and swayed heavily as she approached. Her ocean blue eyes met Twilight's, and she shot the sudden, nervous unicorn a wink. That's quite all right. I'm not really in the mood for such things right now, and, well, no offense, I'm not particularly into mares. And why would management write down such a thing?" Ignoring the interrogation, the beige pony crawled onto the bed, making Twilight sit up and attempt to retreat, only to be confined by the lack of room. The maid sat on top of the lavender mare and leaned in, kissing her softly on the snout. "I'd normally say that you don't know what goes on in these motel rooms, but I guess you'll find out soon enough." No, I'd rather not, thank you," Twilight begged as her forehooves were stretched out and tied tightly to the bedposts. Though she struggled to free herself the entire time, the captor's earth pony strength was more than enough to keep her subdued. Finally, after most of her strength had left, Twilight fell limp, short of breath. She looked up, both angry and confused, at the grinning housekeeper, only to watch her place the garter belt on her horn. Growing more annoyed by the moment, she swung her head side to side, trying and failing to fling the garment from her appendage. "Why are you doing this? Let me go!" Twilight growled. "Celestia, help!" The cleaning mare climbed up and wrapped her hind legs around the unicorn's shoulders, laughing as she went. "Oh, she's not here." She took Twilight's head in her hooves and buried her face under her skirt, grinding it into her bare crotch. Panicking and doing everything she could not to be smothered, Twilight slammed her eyes shut and grit her teeth, summoning her magic to throw her attacker away. Except nothing happened. My magic! What's going on?" A heartbeat later, it hit her. "Oh no." The maid pulled her skirt up and gave her a moment to breathe. More accurately, a moment to gasp in horror. "Hey, Twilight!" Pinkie Pie shouted. "Good to see you again. I must say, I didn't know you felt that way about me. I mean, you didn't even wine me and dine me first. But enough talk. Let's get down to business." Before Twilight knew it, Pinkamena shut her legs tight, crushing her long, purple neck between them. With her air supply suddenly being cut off, the unicorn wasted no time in reciting the lines of the practiced spell whenever she could suck in a breath. By the third, foreign-sounding phrase, Twilight's horn began to glow. Surprised by the turn of events, Pinkie loosened her grip, overtaken by curiosity. Twilight was clearly trying to perform some kind of ancient spell or chant. But she couldn't perform magic in a dream. She simply wasn't powerful enough. Was it something Celestia taught her? What were they up to? Twilight completed her spell, and her eyes glowed brightly for a moment. Unfortunately, they eventually fizzled out when returned to their normal purple state. The unicorn's pupils shrank to pinprick size when she realized the spell hadn't worked. The manic threw her head back and laughed.
What was that? What are you trying to do? Get rid of me? When are you going to learn that you can't do it?
She screamed, slapping Twilight around as she chastised her.
Well, it's been fun. It really has. But it's time to die now. Say hi to your friends for me.
But just as Pinky was about to resume squeezing the life out of the terrified mare between her powerful thighs, she flopped onto the bed, Twilight having suddenly disappeared from beneath her. Once surprise had left her, she growled under her breath and narrowed her eyes.
All right, Twilight, she mumbled. If that's how you want to do things, fine by me.
Letting out the last bits of her rage, the lunatic punched the headboard in front of her, splintering it to pieces. Twilight snapped her eyes open and clawed at her throat, gasping fitfully for breath. Darting her sight back and forth across the room, she quickly spotted her mentor looking over her and began to relax. She sat up, taking one last look around before seeing the small rock by her hooves. Its unmoving smile sent a shiver down her spine. She had enough smiles for one night. Are you all right, Twilight?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Frustrated, she gave Rocky a little kick.
Didn't work.
I saw. But honestly, I had no idea if that spell was going to function properly in the dream. But when I didn't see the offering being broken down, like when I cast myself a millennia ago, I had a bad feeling. With a long sigh, the unicorn's face fell onto the blanket.
So, what now? How are we supposed to do it?
First things first, Celestia said calmly. We need to get home. We'll figure something out. I promise. Now, get some rest. We got an early train tomorrow. The young pony looked up at her concerned teacher, spying her bloodshot eyes. What about you? No offense, Princess, but you look awful. Are you sure you don't want to rest yourself? Maybe you could teach me how to monitor sleep patterns like you can, and we can sleep in shifts, or... It's all right, Twilight. I appreciate your concern for my well-being, but I'll be fine. Don't worry. The Ponyville clock tower's moonlit face read 3:30. Though the night itself was quiet enough, the chirping of crickets and the fluttering of leaves in the cool breeze played the citizens a relaxing lullaby. One particular section of town stirred with unwanted life. Outside a small home near the center of the neighborhood stood several angry residents, banging on doors and windows and yelling as loudly as the hour would allow them. Unfortunately, their shouts were unable to penetrate the loud humming pouring from inside. The furious stallions and mares could even feel the ground vibrating under their hooves. Finally, an exhausted gray mare opened the door to greet them. The bags under her eyes and unkempt mane told a lot of the story.
What the hay is going on in there? One stallion barked. You have any idea what time it is? My kids have to go to school in the morning and they can't sleep.
Octavia stepped outside and closed the door, drowning out the loud music as best she could. As the crowd grew larger and more restless, she raised a hoof to quiet them. This wasn't the first time the situation had occurred, and likely wouldn't be the last. But that didn't mean she had to be screamed at. If only her roommate would come talk to the neighbors just once.